Let us know what got you into entrepreneurship initially.
So initially, it really was like an accident because I remember I actually did a bachelor in business. And I remember sitting in a lecture one day, and the professor was saying 50% of you will start their own business one day. And I just kind of had this moment where I was like, not going to be me for sure. And I think probably a year later, I was living in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I had met a guy, I was in love. I was actually trying to find a job so I could stay in Argentina. And I went from job interview to job interview, and it was just unbelievable. Some of the things I experienced there was shocking, and I didn't get a job. Like, no one would offer me a job. My Spanish wasn't great either, so that probably didn't help. But I was like, I'm gonna have to leave. Like, no one is offering me an opportunity here. And so my boyfriend at the time, he had just started running these communal dinners in his living room together with his best friend who's a chef. And he said to me, "Why don't you just work with us? We could use a German in the team, someone who's organized." And that's what I did. So basically, it was the three of us really. And for 18 months, we were running dinners for tourists in our apartment in Buenos Aires. And then eventually got an investor who was at the time Argentina's number one poker player. None of us had any experience in running a restaurant. None of us had any experience in running a business. And all of a sudden, we were giving, I think it was $150,000. And we basically spent the entire investment on renovating a restaurant, paying 6 months rent up front. But basically, by the time we opened the restaurant, we were out of money. And so the next 2 years were just this constant survival struggle. And we had to ask the investor for more money. He basically was not happy with us for a very long time. My ex even asked his mom for more money because it was just like, we went from being in this apartment where all the money we were getting was just cash in hand. We had no overheads except for the rent. And all the money we got was just for us. And so the first 18 months were actually really fun. We were working crazy hours, and every night we would just host these dinners, drink wine with our guests, like go to bed at 2 a.m., wake up the next day, rinse and repeat. And then once we got the investment and kind of turned it into a real business, that's when things got really hard because we also went from a team of 3 to a team of, first, I think it was about 12, then it grew to 20, then at some point it was 25 or even 28. So it was really, really tough. And I was like probably the most unhappy I've ever been in my life. Yeah, in the end, we got an opportunity to open a restaurant in Barcelona. So the two of us moved there. I was super happy. And at the very last minute, it fell through. And he went back to Argentina. And I said, I'm never going back to Argentina. And eventually we broke up. We did long distance for a while, didn't work. So we broke up. And I basically moved back in with my mom. So this was 5 years after we had started the restaurant. Things were going in English. I had a lot of British boyfriends, and they would say "tits up." I don't know if I can say this in English.
You can say it. This is uncensored reality here. Tits up happens a lot in entrepreneurship.
We went from literally making money to suddenly being $200,000 in debt, and it was just crazy. And so I was like, I'm out. I don't want anything to do with this anymore. At the same time, I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? I was 29 at the time. I literally had no money to my name. I never had a job, like, except for waitressing and working in, as a student in cafes and Nando's and things like that. So I was like, who is going to hire me? And also, where am I going to go? Because one thing that was for sure, I was like, I don't want to go back to Germany. So I kind of stayed with my mom for a few months, regrouped, and then moved to Mexico. And that's eventually where I then got the idea to start my own online business.
One of the interesting things is I think during this time you grew this restaurant. It became one of the most popular in Buenos Aires, right?
Yeah.
So it was a huge growth. I mean, it was recognized publicly, but also behind the scenes, you have to deal with so much debt and huge amount of people that you're managing. And I don't know if you ever think about this, but you actually went into the most difficult industry that exists. I will say that restaurant industry is one of the most brutal, difficult industries to make it in. And you were successful if you think about how you raised and created it, but it wasn't without a cost, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I wouldn't change anything about my story and about my life, but it definitely was not easy.
What were some of the things, if you look back on this first venture for 5 years, what are some of the things that you took with you into this next one that you think had a hand in making it so that you were more successful?
Resilience and that willingness to just try. Because with the restaurant, we tried so many different things. Like the cruise ship industry, we went to like 100 hotels in person to introduce the concept. We went to language schools, like we did everything you can imagine. And I feel like I've tried everything you can imagine in this business. And looking back, like it took me 2 years until I figured out what worked for me. So in the long run, I mean, those 2 years felt really long at the time, but in the long run, it's not that long of a time. So definitely the willingness to try and the resilience to just get knocked down, get up again, try something else, having that vision of something that I wanted to create. Like with the restaurant, our vision was to build a business that would give us the freedom and the money to travel the world. We were pretty naive to think that that was how the restaurant industry worked. But that vision really didn't change for me when I started my second business. And it really was that whole idea behind I wanted to be just me and my laptop. I don't want to have a big team. I don't want to have investors. And I want to have that freedom lifestyle and the ability to work from anywhere. And that's really like the one thing I knew when I went into my second business was I want to build an online business. So definitely the vision stayed the same. Everything else probably went in a really different way.
I want to ask you about that too, because I think that I know, and this is also why I really respect what you do and what you talk about, is you're very transparent about the fact that for the first 2 years of your online business, you were figuring things out. It wasn't like overnight that you were making the money that you're making now, or you had the audience that you have now. It was experimentation. Can you kind of talk about what were some of the really random things you tried in those first 2 years that was, like, throwing up against the wall, whether they worked or not? We're just curious to see, like, what are some of the things that you experimented with?
Yeah. So first, I think I just created different courses because I like tried to launch something, didn't really have the success that I wanted to have. So I was like, it must be the offer. So I created something else. And then that didn't really work. So I was like, oh, it must be something else. So I created another course. So I created a lot of different bigger, smaller courses in these first 2 years before I realized it's not actually the offer that's the problem. It's that I don't know how to sell it. So while I was trying to like different launch strategies, right? I launched with a challenge, I launched via email, I did a webinar that really sucked the first couple of times I did it. I did some in person things. So I was doing workshops at co working spaces, which was actually really fun. And I actually every single time got either a really amazing in person connection or a client from that. What else? I tried coaching. I quickly realized that I didn't have a coaching background either. So it's just like, yeah, I'm just going to more like consulting, I guess. Realized that I just didn't have the confidence to charge high ticket. And I probably shouldn't have because I was like just starting out. And so it didn't feel authentic. I didn't like the whole sales call process. And eventually I went back and I remember I had this coach at the time. I was in a group coaching program. And I said to her, I want to build a funnel. And I don't even know if I knew what a funnel really was back then. I was just like, I want to build a funnel. Like, I know I have this one course, my Instagram Secrets to Success course, which was the best performing offer that I had at the time. And I was like, I think I'm going to just focus on this and I'm going to try one more time. And I'm going to try and build a funnel because that seems like the least, how's it called? Least path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And then everything changed.
Once you figured out your sales strategy, essentially, you were able to, but you had all that experience before of creating those offers, even if they didn't resonate or they didn't sell, like,
Mhm.
you could then put that into Instagram Secrets, which was the offer that resonated, and you found the way to sell it.
Yeah.
And that's something I think that takes time. It really does. It's either it takes time or it takes money to learn that, but it's no one comes out of the door and immediately sells.
Yeah. I think that's probably the biggest lesson, right? Like most of us aren't born marketers. We start a business because we feel passionate about something and we want to help people and we have this idea for, this lifestyle that we want to create. And then we realize like, oh, actually in order to get clients, I need to learn how to market and how to sell.
Yeah. And to also understand what do they actually want, because you've probably done this too. I'm going to ask you in a second actually. I've done this where you have these ideas you want to create and you think are amazing, and people don't want them.
Yeah.
Did you have, cuz you've created, isn't it something, it's something crazy like 20, 30, 40 courses over the course of your
Yeah.
career?
So at the beginning of the year, it was 47, and I
Wow.
definitely created a couple this year.
Of those 47, what was one that just didn't stick? One that people just didn't come to? And maybe it actually wasn't because of the course. It could be you didn't have the funnel in place, but what was one that you look back now and you're like, "Yeah, I can kinda see why that didn't."
Yeah, so it's actually super interesting. I created this membership in the beginning, which was called the Scale Up Club. And
Mhm.
it was a really awesome program. And the first time I launched it, I think I sold it for $47 a month. And I tried so hard to make it work and I changed it. I changed the like format of it. I brought in guest experts. I changed the length of it. I changed the price of it, relaunched it, got a few people in, but it just never really took off. And then years later, I want to say like 2 years later, I realized it's that the word scale really doesn't resonate with my audience because a lot of the people in my community and my audience are at the beginning of their journey to creating an online business. And so they're not thinking about scaling. And then I realized like what the word that really resonates with them is passive income.
Mhm.
So I actually took this Scale Up Club program, I restructured it again, and then I relaunched it as the Passive Income Accelerator. And that's what I've been doing now for the past year and a half. And I've had amazing success with it. So the offer itself, like it's better now than it was just because I've also learned more things and I've just understood like what is the actual best structure I can create. But it really came down to the name and how I was selling it.
This is a super powerful lesson because I think if people are listening, some people be in the beginning of the journey, some people a little further. It's sometimes you just repurpose something.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is really repurposing, changing the language, changing the format, changing the price too, because for something like that, where you're helping someone scale or get passive income, it needs to be an investment,
Yeah.
right? That can't just be, it was a super fair price you had. But if you're trying to get people to commit the time and effort, they need to feel like, oof, I
Yeah.
got to make this work.
Yeah, definitely.
In if we're thinking about your whole journey, which now has been How long have you been an entrepreneur total, if you include also when you were in the restaurant business?
Yes,
It's
it
been
started 2011, so how many years is that? Yes.
don't make me do math. This is towards the end of my cycle. I can't do math right now.
God, maths. Yeah, 12 years, I think.
12 years, yeah. And so, like, what I love about that is you put in the time to make this work, and your second business was the one that exploded. I mean, your first business too, actually, if you think about it, really was, but you took it and you kept going, and that's one of the biggest things, isn't it, that they teach you is the difference between succeeding or not in entrepreneurship is resilience. It's like,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think, now I've been doing this online courses, online coaching for 7.5 years at this point in time. And you see people, there's like different trends. People start something, people jump on a trend because it looks easy. All these people promising overnight success and become a millionaire just by doing this one thing. And then they just eventually drop off because they realize, like, oh my God, this stuff is actually hard. And I really think it's at the end of the day, it's you against you, and it's your mind, and whether you give in to the fears, and whether you let like your failures kind of define whether you're going to get up again in the morning and try again, or whether you like hold that vision and you just try again and you try again and you try again.
Yeah. What do you think is one of the biggest failures that you've had across the time you've been an entrepreneur that you really learned from?
So I really don't see many things as failures. I think,
Yeah.
you really do learn from everything. I definitely have had launches where I had a lot of expectation, and then the launches failed, if I want to say that. And it just, there's so many reasons for why they failed, quote unquote, whether it's down to me not selling enough, whether it's, again, down to like not talking about the offer in the correct way, or whether it's just kind of creating this pressure and then burning out halfway through and being like, oh, screw this, I don't want to do this anymore. So the lesson I learned from that is that launching just isn't my way of selling. Like, I much rather build a funnel, tweak things, and then get paid every day than living from launch to launch. And that's just me, right? I have friends who have incredibly successful launches, like $1 million launches, and that's how they do it. And they're like, oh yeah, having a funnel would be kind of nice, but I never have time to create one because I'm always launching. But it works for them.
That is the dilemma, but I think that's another reason why I really love what you are promoting, what you're selling, what you talk about, because a lot of people are really burnt out on the lunch model for the reasons that you said. It's so much time, it's variable results, it's not always great, even for people who are super established in it and have done well in the past. It's a lot of emotional energy,
Mm.
and it doesn't give you that same freedom that you get to be able to travel, to leave, to not be on your laptop all the time. And I think for you, like, I love how your work week is, where some days you're not even working. It's like the dream, right? So the passive income and the funnel strategy is something I think would be have been nice to learn about sooner as an entrepreneur. I'm sure you feel the same.
Yeah. I mean, it really never gets old. Like, I do obviously look at my email every day, and I'm trying to look at it later in the day, but when I literally look at it and there's sales notifications in my inbox, it's just really nice.
I want to ask you about this then, because this podcast is centered, of course, on the backstory. You're interesting to talk to because you can talk about this pivot and this restart and the behind the scenes of things that work and don't work. But one of the things that we struggle with is that female entrepreneurs, there's a huge income gap. So if you look at the statistics, men who are entrepreneurs are making way more, they're charging way more. What do you think is the reason behind this? Why is that happening?
Mm. That's so interesting. And I actually did a video series about this specific topic a few years ago where I interviewed men and women. And a lot of it, and this is also what I believe, comes down to confidence, not just not charging higher prices because we don't feel confident in our ability to deliver, in our worth, in the value we provide. And I think that really is the main thing. Men, and obviously not everyone is the same, and there's exceptions to the rule, but really, it's only our mother's generation, really, for the majority, where our moms have maybe started a career, and few of them started their own business. So it's really only our generation of women where we're starting businesses and we're making shit tons of money and we're sharing that with other women and we're inspiring other women. So it's a very, very short period in the history of humanity where women are making money, asking for money, like charging money. So I think we just have still a way to go. Like, I think we've made a lot of progress in such a short period of time, but it's just like we have to really still learn those things. We have to learn to like ask for money. We have to learn
Yeah.
to also play bigger and kind of be like, yeah, I'm like worth this amount. My course or my coaching is worth this amount. And not always try and be like, imposture. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if anyone's going to pay for this. Like that was definitely one of my biggest struggles. It took me years until I started charging for courses or programs that are in the thousands of dollars and not just in the hundreds.
Yeah. Versus I know male entrepreneurs that have done that in 1 month of business.
Yeah.
Not saying that's right either. I think that you should have expertise in whatever you're selling.
Definitely.
It's like, obviously, if you have expertise in the corporate and then you go to sell or
Yeah.
beforehand, fine. But I think that that's true, and I think we don't ask is what you were saying, and that's true. We don't ask from clients, we don't ask from businesses. Final question to wrap it up before we ask where people can connect with you. Super important one, I think, is well, actually, 2 questions. One is, what is the best thing you ever invested in?
I made the scariest investment of my life. I made a down payment for a $25,000 coaching program. And it changed my life because that was the coach that taught me how to build a funnel. And that eventually turned into millions of dollars. It was just this big commitment from myself. And at the time, I literally only had enough money for the down payment. And it meant like leaving New York City where I wanted to live, moving back to Germany where I really didn't want to live, but living in Berlin is much cheaper than living in New York.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I'm sacrificing this. I'm going to move to Germany. I'm going to get a room in a shared apartment for 6 months and I'm going to go all in on this. And within that year, I literally went from averaging $1,500 a month to 10K months and had my
Mm.
first 6-figure year. And then the year after, we made 500,000, and the year after, the first 7-figure year. So that was hands down the best and scariest investment.
We always talk about how important it is to invest in yourself and how finding the right person or the right program can get you to that next level. How did you know that this was the right investment to make?
Mm.
What was the process of finding this person or this program that made you feel like, okay, I'm even going to move continents to make this work?
She had this beautiful customer pathway where I remember finding her through a Facebook ad. I signed up for some free training. It was so good. I then immediately bought this $200 package. I then signed up for a 9-month group coaching program that I think was $4,500 at the time. And then in that 9 months, I just got to see her as a coach, and I was part of her team at her live event. And at that live event, I actually asked her for a job because I was kind of like, this isn't working for me. And she was like, I want you to join my program. And she just believed in me. And it wasn't BS, like she really believed in me more than I believed in myself. I think this is a really, really important factor because I have since then invested a lot of money in a different kind of coach, and only I invested in her for the name, and I hadn't seen her coach, and it's been a little bit disappointing actually, the outcome of that. So I definitely learned my lesson there. It's like when you invest in someone, really follow them for a while. Like buy one of their lower ticket programs because that, like the way they teach and the way they deliver, like that gives you a little sample of what they're like when you invest more with them.
Everyone that I've had on the show so far in the interviews has said the worst investment they made was in one kind of coach. The best investment they made was in another.
Mm.
So it's very much like the criteria that you put into it, getting to know them, seeing that they're delivering value at these lower levels or on their social media or whatever, where it's not always just clickbait to
Yeah.
get you into the next thing. It's like really giving value, and that's a really an amazing example, and I can understand when you give the backstory of why you felt confident to
Mm.
try and make that leap. It's not like you saw it on Instagram one day and
Yeah.
then you went and moved country.
Yeah.
Like, there was a thought process involved, so I love that. But this brings us to the end, and I think the last thing is just to ask, where can people connect with you? And if you wanna mention too the main programs that you offer to help.
Sure. So the best way to connect with me is on Instagram. So Carla Biesinger. If you want to send me a DM, I read all of my DMs myself and we'll get back to you. And would just love to hear if you send me a message and let me know that you heard me on Sade's podcast. And my two main programs and how I help my audience or my community is my Instagram Secrets to Success course, which is really the full step by step program to help you grow your following, grow your engagement, and also really attract ideal clients. No cold DMs, no like sleazy things I'm going to get you to do. And then the second one is my Passive Income Accelerator, which is a program designed to help you create and launch your own online course and lay the foundation for building a funnel.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing those. And I'm just going to add a little extra here about the Instagram secrets courses. I've done this one and I've been on Instagram for like 7, 8 years, hating it. And I found that everything you have in that course, it would have been amazing to get from the beginning because it's kind of things you learn haphazardly as you go, trial and error. And then having them in one place is really helpful because you're not trying to get people to have 1 million followers. That might happen, sure, but your goal is really to help them get in front of their community, and I think that's a very different approach from the sleazy DM 50 people every day. So, thank you for those courses, thank you for all you do. I will include links in the show notes for them, and thank you for coming on the show and giving your time again.